The distress signal came through at 0200 hours. Unidentified distress beacon detected. Origin: Colony Theta 7. Status: unknown. No response to hails. I barely had time to process it before Command scrambled a team. Colony Theta 7 had been declared lost 15 years ago, vanished from all known star charts without a trace. No debris, no evidence of attack, just gone. Entire research stations and supply ships sent after it had met the same fate. No distress calls. No wreckage. Nothing. Until now. I stood at the helm of the Vanguard, my breath slow and controlled, heart hammering against my ribs as I stared at the data feed. Commander Hayes, Lieutenant Rourke called from the NAV station, his voice tight. Beacon signal is deteriorating, but it's definitely coming from Theta 7's last known coordinates. I glanced at my second-in-command, Lieutenant Reyes, who shifted uneasily in his seat. This could be a trap. I didn't need the reminder. We were about to fly straight into the black, chasing a ghost colony that had no right to exist. But orders were orders, and we had people to save, if there were any left. ETA? I asked. 3 hours at FTL speeds, Rourke responded. Prep for insertion, I ordered. Full combat loadout. I want drones scanning ahead before we drop out of FTL. Reyes shot me a wary glance. You think we'll need heavy weapons? I wasn't sure how to answer. All I knew was that this mission didn't feel right. We dropped out of FTL on the edge of a darkened system. No sun. No natural celestial bodies. Only a swirling mass of fractured space where Colony Theta 7 should have been. It looked wrong, like a wound in the void. Then, through the swirling blackness, we saw it. Colony Theta 7, intact. Its structures were still standing. Towers of glass and steel gleamed under the soft glow of artificial lights. Solar panels still functioned, drawing energy from nowhere. And yet, there was no movement. No chatter over comms. No signs of life. Only silence. My gut twisted. Send the drones. The small, spherical probes zipped out of the Vanguard, streaking toward the colony with flashing sensor lights. We watched through their feeds as they moved through the empty streets. Everything was pristine, too pristine. Buildings weren't just abandoned. They looked as if people had left mid-step, like they had evaporated in an instant. Meals sat untouched on tables. Vehicles idled on autohover, drained of power. And then, one of the drones caught movement. A figure. Human-shaped, but wrong. It stood in the middle of an open plaza, motionless, facing away from the drone's camera. Zoom in, I ordered. The feed enhanced, bringing the figure into focus. It was humanoid, draped in a tattered jumpsuit, hair matted, skin pale. But it wasn't breathing. Is it alive? Rourke whispered. The drone inched closer. The figure didn't react. Then, its head snapped toward the drone. No movement. No transition. 1 second it was facing away, the next it was staring directly at us. Its eyes were empty. No pupils. No irises. Just voids. Then the feed cut out. The screen flashed with static. Then the screaming started. A single, blood-curdling wail, not coming from the drone, not from our speakers, but from the Vanguard itself. From everywhere. The entire ship trembled as if reality itself was shaking. The lights flickered. Crew members clutched their heads, their eyes wide with terror. I gritted my teeth against the rising tide of nausea. Then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. Silence. The ship stabilized. The screens cleared. The lights stopped flickering. The only thing left was the still, untouched colony below us. I exhaled, forcing the adrenaline out of my veins. We're going down there, I said. Reyes shot me a sharp look. After what we just saw? Especially after what we just saw, I muttered. I gathered my team, Reyes, Rourke, Medic Vasquez, and security officers Dorn and Halloway. Each of us carried pulse rifles, motion scanners, and body armor. The airlock sealed behind us as our drop shuttle disengaged from the Vanguard and descended toward the silent colony. As we breached the atmosphere, our scanners glitched, Interference, like the entire planet was scrambling our readings. We touched down in the central plaza, the same place where the figure had stood. Only now there was nothing there. The colony was dead quiet. The air was breathable, but something about it felt heavy, like walking through the last echoes of a scream. "Stay sharp," I murmured, pulse rifle at the ready. "Fan out." We advanced through the streets, the sound of our boots the only noise in the emptiness. We passed buildings still powered but abandoned, personal belongings scattered as if the owners had simply disappeared mid-stride. "Commander," Rourke's voice crackled in my earpiece, "you're gonna want to see this." We regrouped inside what looked like a research lab. The terminals were active, screens filled with corrupted data. And the walls were covered in writing. Not human writing. A language that twisted the longer we looked at it, symbols shifting like they were alive. I didn't need to understand the words to feel the warning they screamed. Then Vasquez whispered, "What the hell is that?" We turned. And saw them. Rows of bodies. Not decomposed. Not mummified. Perfectly intact. Frozen in time, their eyes wide open in horror, mouths twisted in silent screams. Their skin shimmered as if caught between existing and not. Then, one of them blinked. A slow, deliberate blink. My breath caught. They're alive. No one moved. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. Then, without warning, every single frozen body turned to look at us. A perfect, synchronized movement. I heard someone, maybe myself, mutter, "Shit." Then the lights died. And the screaming began. The lights went out. Darkness swallowed us whole. My pulse rifle's targeting reticle flickered, struggling to compensate for the interference. My breath came sharp and fast, and I forced myself to slow it down. Panicking in the dark was a death sentence. "Everyone, sound off," I hissed. A beat of silence. Then, "Reyes here? Vasquez alive? Dorn? Holloway?" A sharp intake of breath. Something moved past me. Rourke's voice came last, strained. "I see them." The bodies, no, the people, had begun to twitch. Their heads jerked in unnatural, mechanical movements. Their mouths opened in unison, as if gasping for air they hadn't needed for years. Then they stepped forward. Not a stagger. Not a stumble. A synchronized movement, their limbs jerking like marionettes on invisible strings. I aimed my rifle. "Do not engage unless they make a move on us." Dorn swore under his breath. "They're already making a move on us, Commander." The bodies advanced, their empty eyes locked onto us. Then the screaming returned. Not from them. From inside our heads. I dropped to one knee, gritting my teeth as my skull threatened to split open. The sound wasn't a sound, it was memories. Memories that weren't mine. I saw flashes of something incomprehensible, fractured images of the colony before it vanished. Scientists running, alarms blaring. A door opening. And beyond that door, something watching. Reyes grabbed my shoulder, snapping me back. "Commander, they're almost on us." I pushed through the psychic assault, forcing my rifle up. Back to the exit. Now. We moved as a unit, our boots slamming against the metallic floor, our breath coming in rapid bursts. The figures kept pace, their movements jerking, their faces locked in twisted, frozen screams. Then one lunged. Holloway fired. The pulse round hit center mass. And passed straight through. The figure didn't even slow down. Holloway's curse barely left his lips before it grabbed him. His body arched, convulsing as his scream rose into a raw, unbearable pitch. His form blurred, shimmering like a glitch in reality. And then he was gone. Erased. Not dead. Not a corpse. Just gone. Like he'd never existed. Dorn fired wildly, pulse rounds scorching the air. It did nothing. The figures kept coming. I grabbed his collar, dragging him toward the door. "Move, goddammit!" We burst out of the building and into the open street. Reyes sealed the entrance behind us, the emergency lockdown slamming a reinforced barrier in place. For a second everything was still. Then, bang. The metal buckled. The barrier bulged outward, as if something inside was rewriting the rules of physics. We didn't wait to see what would happen next. "Shuttle, come in!" I barked into my comms. Static. The colony around us had changed. Buildings weren't where they had been minutes ago. The skyline twisted, angled in ways that made my stomach lurch. Like the entire place was shifting, rewriting itself in real time. Then I saw them. Figures standing on rooftop. Watching. Not moving. Not chasing. Just observing. Their hollow eyes were locked onto us. "This isn't a colony," Vasquez whispered. "It's a trap." I felt it too. The air itself seemed to be thinking, pressing against my skin like an unseen presence. Then Reyes froze. His face paled. "Oh no." I turned. And saw our shuttle. Or what was left of it. It had been changed. Stretched, warped, its hull folded in impossible directions. The cockpit was inside out. The engines spiraled into themselves. And standing beside it was Holloway. Or something that looked like him. He smiled. But his mouth was too wide. His skin shimmered like static. When he spoke, his voice came from everywhere at once. "You shouldn't have come back." Dorn raised his rifle, but I grabbed his arm. "Don't." Holloway, or whatever had become of him, tilted his head. "You still think you're real." His eyes locked onto mine. And I felt something burrow into my mind. Not words. A question. What if you never left? The world tilted. I saw myself, standing in the plaza. Alone. Then I was in the research lab. Watching. Then I was screaming in the dark. Then, back in my body. Reyes was shaking me. "Hayes. Snap out of it." I gasped, my throat raw. Holloway's form flickered. His smile widened. "You were always here." And then, the colony shifted. The sky tore open, revealing something behind it. Not space. Not stars. A reflection. Of us. Of the colony. Of everything. An endless recursion. A reality folded into itself. A prison with no walls. Then the ground fell away. And we plummeted into the abyss. We weren't falling. Not in the way we should have been. The ground had disappeared beneath us, but there was no sensation of wind rushing past, no stomach-lurching drop. Instead, we were suspended, floating through a space that wasn't space. A vast, lightless void stretched in all directions, and yet, I could still see the colony. It hung above us like a reflection in black water, twisting and shifting, its structures warping as if something unseen was reshaping it in real time. The buildings bent at impossible angles. The streets coiled like veins through a body that no longer followed the rules of its own design. And then they emerged. Not from the shadows. Not from hiding. They stepped from the fabric of reality itself. Humanoid things, thin and elongated, their forms flickering like unstable projections. They walked wrong, too fluid, too seamless, as if movement was a mere suggestion they barely adhered to. Their heads tilted in perfect unison as they looked at us. I tried to move. My limbs felt disconnected, distant, like I was a puppet controlled by hands I couldn't see. Then, the whispers began. No, not whispers. Memories. Flooding into my mind, not my own. I saw the colony's past, the research teams, the first settlers stepping onto its soil. Their excitement. Their hope. Then, the discovery. A rift. An anomaly buried beneath the colony's foundations. They had called it a dimensional instability. A minor tear in the fabric of spacetime. Something they could study. But they had been wrong. It wasn't a tear. It was a mouth. And they had fed it without knowing. A deep hum vibrated through the airless void. The humanoid figures moved closer. Their faces were blurred, as if reality itself refused to define them fully. One of them reached for Reyes. She convulsed. Her body glitched, a rippling distortion like an old recording skipping frames. Her scream never made it out of her throat. I lunged for her, but the moment my fingers touched her arm, I wasn't me anymore. I was standing in the colony. The original colony. The sun hung in the sky, warm, golden. The people around me laughed, smiled. Scientists worked, children played in artificial parks. A world before the disaster. Then the sky broke. It didn't crack, didn't explode. It just peeled away. And behind it there was nothing. Not space. Not stars. Not blackness. Nothing. The people saw it. And they understood. Their world wasn't real. Never had been. It was a construct. A fragment of existence trapped between two states, neither past nor present. A thought given form. And when they realized it, the world began to unravel. Their bodies dissolved, their minds erased as though they had never been. The colony collapsed, but not into ruin. It collapsed into absence, erased from time. And yet, something remained. A presence. Watching. Waiting. Learning. Then, it saw me. I was yanked back into my body, gasping. Reyes was slumped in my arms, eyes wide with horror. She wasn't breathing. I pressed 2 fingers to her neck. No pulse. I shook her. Reyes, wake up! Her body convulsed. And then she screamed. Not in pain. Not in fear. But in recognition. She grabbed my wrist with unnatural strength. We were never meant to leave. Then her head snapped toward the figures. And she understood them. I saw it in her eyes. No, I whispered. Reyes, don't. She let go of me. And stepped toward them. The figures opened their arms, welcoming her like she was one of their own. And then, she was. Her form flickered, stretched, and then. She wasn't Reyes anymore. Just another one of them. Vasquez shouted something, but I barely heard him. I grabbed Dorn and Rourke, dragging them backward. We need to move. Now. But Reyes. She's gone. No time for grief. No time for hesitation. I turned. And saw Carter. He stood just beyond the shifting figures, his form flickering like a bad signal, just as he had back on the colony. His eyes burned with recognition. You were always here, he said. The void around us rippled. The world, if it even was a world, began to shift. We weren't in the void anymore. We were standing in the research facility. Except, it wasn't ruined. It was pristine. The colony was whole. And all around us, people walked. Scientists, workers, families, just like before. But something was wrong. They didn't blink, didn't breathe, didn't see us. We weren't in the past. We were in an echo. A memory the colony itself refused to forget. I turned to my team. We have to wake up. Vasquez's breath hitched. What if this is waking up? The colony flickered. The figures from the void stepped into it, seamlessly merging with the people in the streets. And then they all turned to look at us. The illusion shattered. The pristine city crumbled into the abyss. We were falling again. No. We were being pulled. Back toward the thing that had been watching since the beginning. And this time, it wasn't letting go. I hit the ground hard. The impact knocked the wind from my lungs, my vision flashing white. My body screamed in protest, but I forced myself onto my hands and knees, gasping. The world around me was breaking. Not collapsing. Not crumbling. Just ceasing to be. The structures of the colony flickered between solid and transparent, as if reality itself couldn't decide if they should exist. Streets stretched into impossible spirals, twisting back on themselves. The sky rippled like liquid, something vast pressing against it from the other side. A presence. Watching. Waiting. Vasquez and Rourke were nearby, struggling to their feet. Dorn wasn't moving. I crawled toward him, shaking his shoulder. Dorn, come on, wake up. Nothing. Then, his eyes snapped open. But they weren't his anymore. They were empty. Hollow. A void of shifting, mirrored reflections. And I heard the whisper. He was never here. I yanked my hand back. Dorn dissolved. Not into blood. Not into dust. Just gone. Like he had never existed. Rourke screamed. I turned just in time to see Vasquez grabbing her, pulling her away from something behind her. No. Not something. Carter. Or what was left of him. He stood among the ruins, his body a shifting mass of possibilities. His face wasn't a face anymore, it was versions of himself, flickering between different ages, different outcomes, as if he existed in every possible moment at once. His voice was all of them speaking at the same time. This place was never real. The ground beneath us split. We had seconds, maybe less. I grabbed Vasquez and Rourke and ran. Where? It didn't matter. There was no safe place. Only escape. If such a thing even existed anymore. The sky peeled apart. The thing behind it pushed through. Not a creature. Not a force. Something worse. A correction. A hand reaching to erase the mistake. And we were the mistake. The colony had never been a place. It had been an echo. A fragment of something long gone, trapped in the wrong timeline, sustained only by those who believed in its existence. The settlers. The scientists. And we had brought it back to life. But it wasn't supposed to be. The correction surged forward. The buildings folded inward, the very concept of the colony being rewritten into nothing. The last survivors, the ones we had come to save, were vanishing. Not dying. Just forgetting to exist. I saw one of them look at me, and then blinked out of reality. The only thing left was us. And Carter. He stepped toward me. We never left, he whispered. And I understood. We had never come here. We had always been here. I shook my head. No. That's not true. Carter smiled. It was the most terrifying thing I had ever seen. Then why is the door still open? I turned. And there it was. The portal. Glitching. Flickering. Still there. Still connected. A chance. The only chance. Go! I shoved Vasquez and Rourke forward. They hesitated, then ran. I turned back. Carter was reaching for me. No. Not Carter. Not anymore. I grabbed my rifle, aimed at his head, and fired. The bullet never hit. It stopped midair. Then reversed. Straight into my gun. It exploded in my hands. Pain tore through me, my body hitting the ground hard. Carter knelt beside me. You can't leave, he said. You are part of it now. I could barely breathe. But I could still fight. With everything I had left, I pulled the last detonator from my belt. A dead man's switch. Primed to burn everything behind me. Carter saw it. And for the first time, he hesitated. I smiled through the pain. Watch me. I pressed the trigger. The world detonated. A surge of white-hot energy ripped through the collapsing colony, the entire echo of reality collapsing in on itself. I turned, and jumped through the portal. I woke up screaming. Metal. Cold. The scent of antiseptic. I wasn't in the colony anymore. I was in a medical bay. Alive. Vasquez sat beside me, bruised, exhausted. Took you long enough? My mouth was dry. My head pounded. The mission? She shook her head. There was never a colony, Lang. I froze. What? Her expression was hollow. Haunted. They scanned the surface. There's nothing there. No settlement. No survivors. Nothing. I struggled to sit up. That's impossible. We were there. Were we? Her voice cracked. She reached into her pocket. Pulled out something. I took it. A dog tag. Reyes. I stared at it. A whisper slithered through my mind. We were never meant to leave. The overhead lights flickered. Something watched from the shadows. And I knew. We hadn't escaped. Not really. We had only brought it back with us.